You know, son, you just asked me what kind of a movie you'd like to watch. Well, I don't want a movie with violence. I've never had the youth for fantasy, but son, I'm going to give you the greatest movie that you've ever seen in your life, and I'm going to just say, at the end of the night, when you go home, you'll be very satisfied, because you'll see Ox Baker in all of his glory, and like I said, son, you want a good movie, and if you watch my movie, I can tell you one thing, when you go home that night, you'll say to yourself, boy, I wish they would make movies like that again, because I really enjoyed it. I'm going to tell my mother and father I'm not ashamed, because there was no swearing, no murders, nothing. It was just a wholesome, warm, it's just like you had a dog. You can love it and you have it together. Now, son, I want you to watch this movie one more time, because I can tell you one thing. You've not seen anything like it, and as long as Mark is involved, you'll never see anything like it again, because we have a movie which everybody in the family can love. And Ma, I love you. I'll see you soon.
Hi, I'm Mike Messier. I'm the director of this movie, Ox Baker, One of the Boys. This is a series of interviews that was conducted with Ox Baker at his home in the year 2013, about a year before Ox passed away. Ox had a lot of things he wanted to say to the pro wrestling fans, and he wanted to honor all of the wrestlers that he worked with and against in the pro wrestling industry. And Ox Baker is a legend. He was a friend of mine. In the pro wrestling world, he was basically a father figure to me. And this one's for you, Ox, and for all the guys that you worked with and all the women you worked with too. Ox Baker is always going to be one of the boys.
Hello, fans. You know, a lot of times you get a phone call in the middle of the night and this guy passed away and that guy had an accident, or this guy, and you say to yourself, oh, well, I wish I could see them one last time or said goodbye to them, you know. I know my wife, she died in her sleep. I didn't get a chance to tell her one more time how much I loved her. It's like my fans, I want you to know that I loved you.
Hi, my name is Mike Messier. I'm here with pro wrestling legend, Ox Baker. Ox, as you may know, is the legendary wrestler who's known for the Heart Punch, the Hurt Punch, and he's here to discuss his career in wrestling. Ox, I want to thank you for being my friend, and thank you for this exclusive interview.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here with my wrestling crowd, because this tape is actually for the people that have watched Ox Baker over the last 40 years. Yes, I started in 1964, Mike. I don't know if you knew that or not. 1964, Ox Baker started wrestling. Why did I start? Why did I want to go in the ring and get beat up? Well, I got married a couple years before that, and surprise, surprise, I got all the bills that married people get.
Right.
And after a while, I'm working at the Rath Packing Company in Waterloo, Iowa. 1964, I believe the wages were 90 cents an hour. I seen on TV, Channel 7, Waterloo, Iowa, they was bringing professional wrestling for the very, very first time. We're talking about 1963 at this time. I went down there, watched it. I wasn't really happy with it. I wouldn't say I was a wrestling fan, because I was a star football player, star amateur wrestler. I was a star in my own right long before professional wrestling. But as I watched these guys, I seen they was having a real good time, and as I was walking out of the place, I heard the guy that I didn't know at the time, he had set up the rings for this guy, and he was getting $11 a day. He said, I got to get more than that. I need that for my family. I said, well, $11 on top of the $90 I'm making would be all right. So I said, I know how to set rings up. So the guy, Art Mitchell, at that time said, well, you come next week on TV, you can set the rings up. So I came for several weeks, and I realized that some of the guys that I was watching, I'd actually wrestled in high school, and I'd beat 99% of them. So I said, wow, here they're professionals now. And at that time in '64, the average wrestler, professional wrestler, weighed between 205 to 218. There was nobody 300 pounds. Oh, I should say the Sky High leader was 300 pounds, but the small guys, in fact, the world champion was a guy out of Texas who was one of the legends I'm going to talk about today, was Danny McShane, who was 185 pounds. He was the world champion. And I said to myself, as I watched him, well, I could actually beat that guy. In fact, while I was setting the ring up, he lost the title to a guy called Lou Thez, who's another legend, who really taught me, a wrestling legend, taught me a lesson 2 or 3 years later. But anyway, I got the job of setting up rings. I was going 60, 70, 80, 100 miles, and every night I was making anywhere from $11 to $14. I had to sell programs on the side, and I found out that the money I was getting was half of the money from the programs they were selling. I was getting nothing out of the gate. So I talked to this one guy, Jerry Miller, who happened to be a second cousin of mine. I said, what are you making a week? I said, you guys are wrestling 4 or 5 times a week? He said, well, the average guy makes like $220 a week.
Yeah.
I said, what? $220? That would almost triple my pay. And I said, how do I get into that? Yeah, I'm setting up rings. He said, well, what you got to do, because you got to remember 1964, you know how many training schools there were for wrestling, Mike?
2?
There was absolutely none.
Okay.
The only way you learned to wrestle, and the way I learned to wrestle, was I would pick a guy up, like another legend I had, Killer Austin. He said, well, drive me to Marshalltown, it's 90 miles, drive me home afterward. I'll teach you a wrestling hold. I said, fine. So I kept bugging Art Mitchell, who was the promoter at that time. I said, I want to get into wrestling. He said, well, you don't know that much about it. I said, well, I've learned 5 or 6 holds. He said, well, let me take you to the basement. He said, I want to show you a few more holds where you don't have to take some. So we went downstairs. He grabbed me right away. I tripped him, took him down, and put him on his stomach. He said, your lessons are over with. He said, you're a better wrestler than I am. He said, Ox, I might get you into professional wrestling. I said, well, I'm happy to do that, but I said, I don't want to lose my job. He said, well, let's work where you wrestle the odd time, you set up the rings for me, keep your job at the butcher shop, right?
Right.
And I forgot to tell you, at the time, 1964, I was actually 30 years old. I was at the age where most guys are quitting a profession, and here I'm starting a profession.
Right.
So I wrestled a few matches. I wouldn't say I was good. I wouldn't say I was bad. I was horrible. But lo and behold, one day they said, God, we need an interview out of somebody. And at the time I was using the bear hug to beat guys with, the ones I was beating. Most of the time I was wrestling 12 minutes, 15 minutes, where there's no winner.
Right.
In wrestling, that's called broadways.
The draw.
And I found out, like, the average wrestler at that time, and still is, didn't care about the wrestling fans whatsoever.
Right.
Well, wrestling fans, Ox Baker cares about you. I always said, without the wrestling fans there, Ox Baker would be making $90 a week at the Packing Company.
Right.
So I started talking to him, and I got chewed out many. Why are you talking to the fans? They're goofs and that. I said, well, they don't seem. They just seem like the average people that want to get entertained. So the guy at announcer, I don't forget his name. This is 40 years ago. Said, Ox, we need an interview out of you. He said, well, like I said, you're using the bear hug, and he said, by the way, he said. You want to talk about your wrestling hold? I said, well, that's the only thing I know how to talk about, you know. So I got on TV, 1964, and he said, Alex, you're using that bear hug. And the announcer was real happy in that. And I said, yeah, I said, I learned it by going to movies. And I said, I'd see a tiger or a lion or something in the jungle or a human being, and it'd be a big, long snake. And all the shows in them days, the big long snake would grab somebody, grab a lion, the tiger, or the human being, and you know what he would do? He would squeeze all the snot out of it.
Right.
Oh my Lord, the announcer said. I went back to the dressing room, and the promoter, my first promoter, who's a legend also, Gus Karras, he said, Ox, you can't use that on TV.
Yep.
You know, in them days, you had to watch what you said. You couldn't really knock somebody or really say you was going to tear their arm off. But you had. I said, well, I'll never say that again. Well, that week, with me saying that, they had the highest ratings they ever had in 3 years.
Right.
The ratings went out of sight. And so the next week, they said, get on there and talk about your wrestling. So the guy happened to notice I had it's a funny story now, but it wasn't funny in them days. I got chewed out big time. He said, Ox, what do you got that rubber bag for? I said, well, I'm only getting $5 a night, so I don't have a wrestling bag, but I have this rubber bag. Went back to the dressing room, they climbed up. Why are you talking about $5 a night and a rubber wrestling bag? I said, well, that is the absolute truth.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So the next Monday they called me and said, you dumb, I won't say the rest of it, but come up to the wrestling office. And unbelievably, and I've laughed at it for over 40 years, the wrestling office, which was like 20 by 30 or 20 by 40, was filled up from the bottom to the top with suitcases. The wrestling people had heard that Ox Baker needed a wrestling bag.
Oh, okay.
So they went in their attic.
Yep.
In them days, there was such a thing as green stamps.
Oh, yeah.
Some were taking their green stamps and getting me a bag. Some of the bags were brand new. Some, all sorts of bags, little ones, big ones. The promoter looked at me and said, you dummy, you can't say that you got a bag, bum, bum, bum. And he said, you pick out one of the bags. And for 7 or 8 weeks, they were selling suitcases out of that office. And I didn't find it out till years later when one of the guys that was working in the office told me, yeah, they sold every one of them, right?
Right.
And every time they saw me, they would chew me out over that wrestling bag.
You should have said that you wanted a girl.
Yeah, and so the next thing that happened, it's funny now, but it wasn't. I guarantee it wasn't funny in them days. They said, "How come you don't sign autographs?"
Right.
I said, "Well, I got a wrestling bag right now, but I said I'm not making enough to buy a pencil or an Eversharp or a pen of any kind."
Right.
Monday morning, I got that call again.
Yeah.
They got hundreds and hundreds of cases of pencils, bag. And again, they told me, they kept some of them themselves because they didn't have any pencils themselves, but
Yeah.
they took them and they used them for many, many years.
Right.
The pencils, right? And, you know, it all wasn't funny in them days. I wasn't making enough to really eat 3 meals a day. I was eating one meal a day, and I cleaned that plate off. I guarantee. I'd ask for extra bread. Things were tough,
Yeah.
but again, being Ox Baker, I loved the wrestling business. I didn't ever think I was going to make big money. I didn't care about big money. I just loved I loved my fans. So, how life is, I went to the store when no one was looking. I picked up a steak and put it under my shirt. Was ready to walk out the front door, and about 4 guys with pistols said, "Stop right there, you dirty thief." So I stopped. They took me in the back room, and the guy lifted my shirt up. "What do you think you're doing with that steak?" I said, "Oh, I had no good excuse." So the owner of the place came in and said, "If you're that hungry to steal that steak, get your rear end out of here. Don't ever come back."
Right.
So the next week I was sitting there, and there was 4 or 5 fans who I talked to regularly. They took me aside and said, "Ox, we heard about the steak."
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, Lord." They said, "What we want to do is every week that you're here, you come over to this guy's house, get a meal, that guy's house and get a meal. We got a party the odd time. We'll bring you a sandwich, blah, blah, blah." And I found out that the wrestling fans, because I loved them, the wrestling fans loved me, you know.
Yeah.
And as time went on, some guys would talk in the back, say, "I got to do an interview today. I'm wrestling this guy and that guy, and I don't know what to say." And I said, "Well, I have an interview for you." "You do? Now, you know yourself in life, you can always take care of yourself. Some way or another, you can take care of yourself. What about helping the other guy?"
Right.
I found out by helping the other guy, I stayed in the wrestling, and for the longest time, I thought they really enjoyed me doing that, but I found out he's just a smart aleck, right? He happens to be a good talker, right?
Yeah.
And finally, the promoter, Gus Karras, like I said, "We're keeping you here because you're the best talker we've ever seen in wrestling." So these other guys, all they can do is about tearing someone's arm off and that there. And I would give you like, you probably want a typical interview I would do, right?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I say, I'm asking Big Bob Brown next week. Now, Big Bob Brown has a very good reputation. I heard he's won 70 matches, 60 matches in a row. But my grandmother called up and said, "Ox, I just spent 3 hours making a strawberry rhubarb pie.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be listening in, and if Big Bob Brown beats you, you don't get a piece of pie." Oh, my Lord. I went out there, and Brown had to stop me several times and said, "Why are you kicking? Why are you hitting so hard?" I said, "Brown, I don't want to lose that pie."
Yeah.
So that's the way I interviewed. I switched it around. And like I'm going to tell people right now, 40 years of wrestling, even interviewing, I didn't have to curse to do it.
Right.
I just used the plain Iowa farm boy language, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd be wrestling this guy here, and a lot of times you were told whether he was going to win or lose at the time. And so if I wasn't going to win, I didn't care. I would just get up afterward and say, "Give me another chance," to the guy. And if I would win, I would win the matches. So I never worried about that. So many guys worried about this guy or that guy. And I run into another legend at that time, probably the meanest man in wrestling for years, and it was called Dick the Bruiser.
Oh yeah.
What a legend he was, folks. He took me aside and he said, Ox, I want to give you a bit of advice. He said, I've lost 300 matches in my career. I'm still number one. I said, how can that be? I heard if you got beat, your career was over. And Dick the Bruiser said, what I would do, I'd get beat 1, 2, 3 in the center of the ring. I would jump up and say my shoulder was up. I'd start arguing with the people that my shoulder was up. I'd grab the policeman, tear his hat off, work him up. I was called working the people up. He said I would go back almost a riot every night. In other words, he had found a new way to get beat and didn't hurt his reputation. I knew the Bruiser over 30 years, and he used that many, many times. And he actually took me aside and he said, Ox, I have a great reputation. Dick the Bruiser, for 30 years, been in wrestling, and I beat them all. World champions, I beat them all. He said, as long as you can talk the way you'll never see a program where Ox Baker got beat by Dick the Bruiser. We might fight out in the audience. We might both get disqualified. We might knock down some old woman. We might tip someone over in a wheelchair, which we did a couple times.
Yep.
But I will not beat you. And at that time, he became my lifelong friend, you know. And at the time, he had another legend called Wilbur Snyder.
Oh yeah.
Wilbur Snyder, seeing how Dick the Bruiser was playing up to me, he never liked me. But one night we had a match with Wilbur Snyder, and he said, I've been a great amateur wrestler, he said. I said, I wrestle a little bit amateur too. So he said, well, I'm going to take you down, and that's 2 points. I said, yeah, you're right. So he got out there, he took me down, and he yelled to the crowd, I got 2 points. I stuck my arm behind him, pushed my body. I went behind him. I said, folks, I got 2 points too. There was no winner. We only had 3 or 4 matches together because he was in another category.
Yeah.
But he told me afterwards, he said, Ox, he said, I never realized you could wrestle like that. I thought you were just a big clown. I said, well, I've got through wrestling with the Ox gimmick. He said, well, you got to give that up. You got to be the rugged guy. And there was a guy from Australia at this time, Johnny Boyd. He said, Ox, here you are. Because my first matches, I hadn't shaved my head.
Okay.
I didn't have the eyebrows. I didn't have the beard. I just a big semi-bald head. And Johnny Boyd took me aside and said, Ox, we're going to shave that head. You're going to pull on them eyebrows because they're thick.
Right.
And so I started pulling on them, and after a while, they stayed up.
Yeah.
I grew the beard down, and I thought I was looking mean, and then my second cousin, again, he said, Ox, you know, your mustache is several colors.
Right.
We want to make it coal black with your eyebrows black. So I started that in 1971. Darken my eyebrows, darken my beard. And the very first night I walked out there, someone, look, it's the devil. And I said that was the right answer. And it's funny about wrestling, I didn't bring up some funny stuff. The first time I walked out there, I hadn't wrestled a bit. I didn't know if the people would hate or like me. I had no idea. But as soon as I got in the ring, they said, you big, ugly goof. They threw something at me. And I found out I couldn't be Mr. Nice Guy.
Right.
So, and I did have the loud voice, and I used it the odd time. I would get in the ring, and the first time I said, "Sit down in your seat or I'll backhand you." And lo and behold, they'd sit down.
Right.
A lot of them wouldn't talk for the whole match till the match was over. And at this time, I got to tell you another funny story. There's a woman called Hatpin Mary. She was told that she got in free if you jab you in the rear end with a needle.
Right.
Hatpin Mary. One time she put about 3 inches in me.
Ouch.
I grabbed her and I said, "Don't ever stick me again or I'll knock you down."
Yeah.
Of course, I had to run back to the dressing room. But the other wrestlers, when they seen that, they all complained to the promoter, "We don't need something like that," because she didn't know she was doing any harm. But
Right.
she was hurting you, you know?
Yeah.
And she was actually a legend in wrestling for a bit, 10 or 12 years. And I heard she kept it up, but she didn't stick him as hard after that, you know? And after a while in Kansas City, I'd been there a while, and they said, "Ox, you sorry." In them days when they used you long enough, or used you up, I should say,
Right.
they'd send you another territory. So they sent me down to Tennessee, and Nick Gula said, "Where you been? I got you involved in 5 matches," and they was all over the place in Rome, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, all over, and I was spending about $120. Gas in them days was 19 cents a gallon, by the
Wow.
way. But I was spending about $130, $40 and making about $100 a week. I was losing money every week. And finally I said, "Nick, I can't keep this up." And he said, "What do you think you are, a star? Get out of here." So I got fired out of Tennessee. But I had a guy from Texas said, "There's a guy there, Marty Siegel, who's a legend too. He was a promoter, and him and his announcer, Paul Bosch, wants to see you because they've heard about the Ox Baker gimmick."
Right.
So I packed up, went to Dallas, Texas. And of course, the big star in Asia was another legend, I have to say, was Fritz von Erich.
The master of the claw hold.
He was the master of the claw hold, had the greatest reputation in the history of Texas.
Right.
And he took one look at me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I want to scuffle." He said, "We call it wrestling here." And Papa said, "Let him use the word scuffling," right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, "I'm going to go scuffle tomorrow night, and I'm going to do this and that, blah, blah, blah." And Fritz hated it. But after a while, he found out the people were coming to see the scuffler.
Right.
Right? And so he worked out a main event, and I made one of the real big mistakes in wrestling. Fritz, in the middle of that match, said, "The heck with you," and he walked back to the dressing room.
Wow. What was the mistake, Ox?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I was going to bring it up. I was trying to think of it myself, but as you said that, as he run back to the dressing room, I grabbed the microphone. Being the great talker that I am, and I know I'm going to get a laugh out of you people that are watching this, I said, "Fritz von Erich, you get back in the ring, or I'll make sure all these people get their money back." The crowd roared, and they had a big crowd. And my reputation was good, and Fritz was great, you know.
Yeah.
200 people went to the box office wanting their money back.
Right. Not good.
They said, "Fritz wants to talk to you in the other room." And he was throwing stuff against the walls. He was kicking. How could you be so dumb to say something like that there? I said, "Well, I think I can rectify it." And he said, how can you direct it? I said, send out the announcer and say, Ox Baker said he'll be here next week, gonna beat up Fritz von Erich for the wrestling fans. So they went out there and said that, and the 200 people that were trying to get their money back, we want tickets for next week. Right? And see, there were good times in wrestling.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like I said, I was learning the ropes. I was getting better. And I've said over the years, I'm going to say right now, Ox Baker never came close to being a great wrestler. He had some certain moves, and we're going to get to the next chapter. He had certain moves and that there. He knew a few things, but on that mic, when you turned him on that mic, he was a different person.
Right.
I don't know if I was full of it or what it was, but I could always talk on that TV. And for 40 years, that was my mainstay. Whenever I'd go to a territory, I said, let me interview. They would listen to me one time. And I met at the time Bobby Heenan.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Bobby Heenan happened to be the manager and the spokesman for Indianapolis, Indiana, which Dick the Bruiser was the boss. So I walked in the studio one day, and Bobby Heenan was so mad he wanted to leave, because in them days we went from Indianapolis, and when you got the big time, you went to Minneapolis, because that was bigger. That was Vern Gagne, who was another legend, by the way. So we got on there, and I said, I'm the Big Ox, and I'm here not to kiss kids, not to pat anybody on the head. I want to knock somebody down. Dick the Bruiser stopped the TV at that time, which you never did before. He said, Bobby Heenan, you're packing your bags. You're going to Minneapolis. I got my talker.
Right.
I got Ox Baker. And so Bobby Heenan, at that time, he was mad in a way, but he was mad because he got his way, right?
Yeah.
And Dick the Bruiser said, every week, I'm going to have you do the announcing here, either drive or fly you to Chicago. I have a wrestling show up there, Bob Luce, and you're going to talk for him. He's never met you, and he wants to meet you. He said, because you're having an audition for wrestling, for interviews, you know.
Mm.
And so I went up there. Then within 40, 50 guys, each and every one of them interviewed one after another. Finally, Bob Luce, who was very, very hyper, threw his pencil down, kicked the chair, and said, I'm sick and tired, can nobody interview, right?
Right.
And I said, you haven't heard me yet, Bob Luce. And he said, big boy, I'm the Ox. Well, let's hear your line. He said, because I've heard all these guys, how good and bad and all. I said, yeah, I've heard them too. I said, they've all missed the point, you know. And so he said, I want you to interview. Do you mind if I give the interview at this time?
Please do.
I said, there's a lot of guys in wrestling today that knows how to wrestle. I don't know if I know how to wrestle. All I know is I like to get somebody down and kick them in the face. Anybody can hit somebody standing up, but it takes a great, great man to kick somebody when they're down.
Right.
I walked out of there. It was deadly silent. He yelled, burn that rest of that tape. He looked at me and he said, Ox Baker, "You're my interviewer." He said, "I've never, ever heard it done that way before," right?
Right.
And he said, "The guy that's running the TV station doesn't even like wrestling. He wants to quit it. He wants to pack up, wants it out of here." I said, the guy that slammed the door when I first come in? Yeah, that's the guy. I said, "Give me that mic back." So the guys all sit down. I said, "Yeah, I remember the first time in Chicago, I don't know anybody."
Yeah.
I said, "I heard there's a TV announcer here, or manager, that doesn't like wrestling. Well, I want to tell him right now, every week that I come here, I want him to slam that door again, and don't come out until I've left the building. Do you understand? Because I'll knock that door down. And you know the next thing I'll knock down?" Bob loose, and nobody could say anything. The guy come running out there. "You think you're talking to me?" I said, "Yes, I'm talking to you." I said, "Your thing is nobody you in the interviews. I'm going to include you every week into my interviews." He said, "Is that right?" I said, "That's what and what do you intend to do about it?" He said, "Could I give you a couple of tickets to go out for lunch?" And that's how I started in Chicago.
Yeah.
And for 3 years, I was the top guy, top interviewer. I had main events like everybody else, but when they wanted that interviewer, I couldn't tell you how many times I went up. I went to this restaurant so many times I got tired of their food. But all it was, the announcer wanted, and I found out in life, the fans really get worked up, really hostile, because they want to be part of it.
Right. They want to cross the line.
If you and me are in a tag team, Mike, they want to tell on you that you didn't tag in.
Right.
They want to tell I have something in my trunks. And that's another story that Dick the Bruiser told me. He said, "Ox, everybody in them days of 64, 65 always had something in their trunks." He said, "What I want you to do is pick something up outside of the ring,
Yeah.
put it in your trunks, and never use it.
Okay.
Reach for it, have the fans yell, 'He's got something in his trunks!' but never use it."
Right.
And I want to tell you at this time, Mike, that was the hardest thing in the world, right? Because you'd seen everybody else use that gimmick, but it wouldn't work for Ox Baker. But I got the crowd, they were sitting at the edge of their seats. What is this goof going to do next?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I never did it.
Right.
I never did it. I remember a lot of times I'd realize the match wasn't going that good. I'd pick somebody out, because we do pick on the crowd.
Right.
One thing I want to tell the audience is the wrestler inside the ring does not know the crowd is there at all. That's one of our secrets.
Yeah.
You could be, I've wrestled 40,000 people, never paid any attention to them. I wrestled 200, never paid. We don't pay attention to the crowd, but we let them think we do.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right.
How does that work? Because you would think.
Okay, you're sitting at ringside, I come up there and say, "Is your wife going to go to the bathroom while I'm wrestling?
Yeah.
I don't want to waste your money." "I'm talking to you, sir." And it couldn't answer you to say, "I wish you wouldn't talk about my wife."
Right.
I said, "I don't even know who your wife is, but if she has to use it, why don't you let her go use the bathroom? Are you one of these bullies?" He said, "I love my wife," right? I said,
Right.
"Well, put your arm around her, squeeze her, right?
Yeah.
But make sure you use the bathroom before my match." Right? And I got it done all the time. And like I said, I'm going to bring this up right now. A lot of people asked me about wrestling yesterday. Okay, I actually wrote a song, the old wrestling blues, which was put into a movie.
Yeah.
First time a wrestler ever wrote a song, sang a song, and did it in a movie. Called The Old You've heard The Old
I've
Wrestling.
heard it on CD. It's a very
Okay.
good song.
And what it was, 50,000, 100,000 people have said, Ox, you wrestled for 40 years. What do you think of wrestling today?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to knock it one way or another. I'm not even going to explain. All I want you to know is, if you think about it, and I'll give you a little illustration here in a second. They believed in Ox Baker. When I would yell, sit down to the guy in the first row, the guy in the ninth row would sit down.
Right.
If they told him to sit down today, the people would laugh at it. Right? When the Sheik would cut somebody's head open, because we do cut our head open, the people would scream and holler, because sometimes he cut deep.
Yeah.
They actually believed what was happening. We made believers out of it, and like I've said for years, when I started in 1964, the price of a match was $1.25. It was harder to get $1.25 in them days for a match than it is $100 today.
Right.
So we always said to ourselves, I'm going to do enough. I'm going to work them up enough to where they get their $1.25 worth. And I always raised my hand and I said, I'm going to do enough where they throw a can upside of my head. I'm hoping it is empty.
Right.
And I want you to know, I got many a can upside the head. I got a lot of them that wasn't empty.
Yeah.
And the only reason that I didn't like that was the first time someone missed to hit one of the people in the audience. I felt so bad about it. I made sure that guy got a pass for the next 5 matches,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
We didn't want the people in the crowd to throw things if someone else got hurt.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Yes, and it brings up another funny story, which I have to tell, but the wrestling fan, throw a can at me, yell at me, shake your fist, tell me you're going to beat me up, you know? And I was doing another movie, I think it was Golden Earrings, and the camera guy sort of was a smart aleck, kept saying for 2 days, because we did a 3-day shoot, you know, sometimes a 3-day shoot.
Yeah.
He could, that wrestling is so funny, I can see through that. They're not punching, they're hitting each other, you know. So I was wrestling a guy, and the camera guy came up close, real close, saying, yeah, I want to get close to these phonies, right?
Right.
As he got closer, he was about a foot away from me, and I told the guy who was choking at the time, I said, duck. And I drove my fist right in this guy's face.
Right.
Knocked him down, his camera went up in the air. I got chewed out. That guy didn't show up again.
Right.
Wrestling today, because of the new way they're doing it, and I have nothing about that, because I went to matches lately, you have too. The people are getting entertained a different way.
Right.
It's not the way we did it in 1964. But the guys, I remember 1964, the guys in front of us, like Strangle Lewis, who was a legend, right? Over Brown, who was a legend, they'd put a hold on for a half hour, 45 minutes.
Right.
That's the way they wrestled in their days, right? They'd go an hour, one hold was 40 minutes. We found out that we call it catch as catch can, one hold after another, you know. And In fact, another funny story is I went to Texas. Now, I went to Florida.
Yeah.
And another legend, Eddie Graham. Smartest man I ever met in wrestling. I said, I can't lose any matches. I got a big reputation. He looked at me, took a big swallow of whiskey at that time. I remember that. He said, well, you won't lose a match in my territory. I got you for 6 weeks. 5 weeks later, I grabbed Eddie Graham. I said, Eddie, you got to do something. He said, what? I said, every night you got me in 45-minute matches where there's no winners.
Right.
I said, how do you think? I said, I wore myself down. I said, sometimes I'm so tired. They had the main event after me, and they showered and shaved and went home, and I'm still sitting there trying to catch my breath.
Yeah.
45 minutes is hard. And I said, the only reason I got by was I had other guys that were going 45 minutes, and they say, Ox, we got to do it the old way. I'll grab your arm, Mike, for 15 minutes. You think I'm trying to tear it off.
15 seconds for me.
And then after 15 minutes, I'll have you kick me, you grab my arm,
Right.
and for 15 minutes, you try to tear my arm off. And that's how we got through with them matches.
Yeah.
But the last 10 minutes, we wrestled regularly, up and down, and 45 minutes. We wrestled 7 nights a week.
So he said, I'll promote you so that you never lose while you're here. And then he had you go these long time limit draws
And
for
that's
5 weeks instead.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what Eddie Graham said, and he looked me in the eye and took another shot of whiskey.
Yeah.
He said, Ox, did you lose any matches?
Right.
You didn't ask to win every match. You just said you didn't want to be a loser.
Right.
I said, don't pay attention to my big mouth. He said, well, you got one more week, you know.
Yeah. And then you can start losing if you want now.
So, yeah. So that was the difference in wrestling today and yesterday. They still sell out crowds. I went around to both casinos where they wrestle.
Yeah.
I went to a lot of their shows. They're all sellouts because the wrestling fans, I guess wrestling is kind of a sport that, unlike football, soccer, basketball, there's no timeouts.
Right.
There's no stopping with the umpire, right?
Yeah.
There's no checking a football out. And if a guy's hurt, you keep working on it until he gets back up and makes that big comeback. So wrestling is a different sport. And I think, I don't know if I'm right, I believe over the years, wrestling has drew more people than any other sport.
I probably agree with that.
Now some sports are 3 months, 4 years. The only sport there is that's year-round is wrestling.
Yeah.
So when the football players are resting up over the week, the basketball players, the baseball players, hockey players, they're taking that 4 to 5 months off. In the early 70s and 80s, I was wrestling over 325 times a year.
Yeah.
Right. I'd start out at like 310. The end of the year, I was 290. Right?
Wow.
And that was every year. And you had to think of different ways to entertain the people. When I started, no one had heard of a battle royal.
Oh yeah.
Nobody, they'd heard of a lumberjack match with guys around the ring, but they hadn't heard of a strap match where the lumberjacks had a belt
Right.
and would belt you outside of the ring.
Yeah.
Right? I happened to create a couple matches. I was wrestling another great legend called the Mongolian Stomper. We went 8 weeks. We did everything imaginable. He said, what else can we do? I said, well, I have two ideas. One of them was we'll put up barbed wire around the ring.
Right.
Someone said they had done that before. I said, we'll put electric current in the barbed wire. I don't believe that match was ever done more than once or twice.
Yeah, just one time.
Okay.
Good enough. Yeah.
No, match has been twice, and I don't have to take the credit for it. I can take it for it with the Stomper because I brought it up to them. I don't know who did the first one, but it was like the loser had to be carried out on a stretcher.
Stretcher match, yeah.
At that time, there had only been one done in history. Never been done in Canada.
Yep.
So I brought that up, the stretcher match, and the Stomper yelled at me, I'm not going to be carried out on any stretcher. I said, well, what I'm going to do is heart punch you. You're going to go on the stretcher. I'm going to have them toted around the ring 10 or 15 times. And while I'm cheering myself on, you're going to pick it up because you have a board taped underneath it.
Right.
And you'll break that board over my head, and they carry me back to the stretcher.
Yeah.
Back to the dressing room. He went wild over that there. And believe me when I tell you, this building, if it held 2,000 people, there was 3,000 people in there that night. Because I'm going to Stomper, I don't know if you heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
Was the greatest bad guy that Canada ever had.
Right.
And Ox Baker, took the Ox gimmick away at that time and put on a lumberjack. I was the lumberjack, the big lumberjack. In fact, I told him I was so cold they knitted me a 25-foot scarf, which I wore into the ring for the time that I was there. But we invented the old stretcher match, right? And I got to take credit. We were the first one. I don't even know if they've done it, but another legend, Stu Hart, who made me scream a few hours down in his dungeon. He made sure there was a current in that electric fence match. He
Nice
made
guy.
sure me and the Stomper run into it a few times.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I think about my fine career, I've mentioned a few legends, and I'm going to do another episode where my next episode is the legend of wrestling I met. Because the purpose of this interview is, I didn't tell you that, I don't know if I told you, Mike. I think it's time for Ox Baker's final bell. And I'm doing this now because I want to get it on tape. I want the people to know about it. I want them to say, Ox Baker said goodbye to all his wrestling fans, all my wrestlers that I knew. Ox Baker never met a wrestler that he didn't like.
Yeah.
I want to tell you one thing right now, never did. They didn't all like me. Jealousy had a lot to do with it. The cliques, which I never could get in, had a lot to do with it. Promotions had a lot to do with it, but I never met any wrestler, never met any of the fans, and they kicked and shoved me, and like I said, some of the cans were full.
Yeah.
But I loved every one of them. And when I go to the matches, I watch them. I went in the dressing room lately, a couple of times I had to tell a guy, why did you yell at that guy? Well, he was making, I said, that guy paid his way in.
Right.
Right. I never did that to the fans. In fact, as I talk about the full cans, a lot of guys said, hey, that can was empty. And the next one wouldn't be empty, right?
Right.
And I remember I stopped one night, I got to tell this story. A woman had a big glass of champagne. dressed up to the hilt. And I said, lady, I want to be back to check your body over later. And I chug-a-lugged that champagne. And, I made a bet with somebody I could make her curse.
Okay.
I drank her champagne and said, have another glass for me, honey, when I get out of the ring. For 10 minutes, she called me every name in the book.
Right.
She smashed all the glasses she had there, right? Took all the champagne off the tables. And you know what was happening inside of my body? I was laughing and giggling, right?
Right.
Because I got it done. I didn't touch her. I didn't grab her. I didn't squeeze anything. I drank a glass of her champagne.
Right.
And you probably want to hear about my legends, don't you?
Yeah, we can do that.
And I want to tell you another one of the reasons why we're doing this interview, which will come up later. Right now, I'm real thirsty.
Okay.
I had to stop and get a drink, if you don't mind.
You guys did an impressive.
Whoa! Look at that. No, it's real. Look. Wait. Lady. Hello. Look.
What am I doing?
Get out of here.
I suck as much as Webster.
The Hurt Punch, a tribute to Ox Baker by Mike Messier. Shed no tears for Ox. He wouldn't want us to. Shed no tears for Ox. The big man is at rest. They say Ox Baker died. He's not with us no more. I say, you don't know my friend Ox. That man will never die. In a world of immortals, mad dogs and snakes, giants and nature boys, there is only one mighty Ox. And that man, I say, he is not dead, not as they claim he is. Because I've seen his smile, I've heard his laugh, and a man like that will never die. Not as long as the wrestling ring, the karaoke bar, Wild Bill's and the Burger King. Remember the man, remember the story, the worn-torn boots and the face of glory, the firm handshake, the smile and grace, and never anyone can take his place. The mighty Ox Baker, family, friend, the mighty Ox Baker, a new beginning, no end.